Welcome to the introduction to WebDirect 13 and also optimizing your FileMaker solution for WebDirect 13. I'm Richard Carlton and I'm going to be your presenter for this video. A little bit of background on who I am. I'm the CEO of RC Consulting. We have a staff of 27 and we're based both in the Central California area as well as the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. I'm a video trainer for VTC Videos, and we're also producing a series of training videos for the FileMaker 13 platform. The next training series that we have will be out in early 2014 on FileMaker Go. We also have a follow-on series on FileMaker WebDirect 13. So what will you get out of watching this video? I want to make you successful with your deployments of WebDirect. And how do we do that? Well, we need to know when to deploy WebDirect and when not to. And that means discussing its strengths and its weaknesses. After we've done that, we're going to talk about optimizing your solution for WebDirect. Now, if you pay attention to that part of the presentation, I'm pretty sure that you can double the performance of your WebDirect solution as it goes out across the network. And I'm not kidding about doubling the performance. If you really pay attention, you can go faster than that. My team has done it for our solutions, and I think we can help you do it for yours too. So who should be watching this video? This session has been tuned for power users who want to begin to deploy web browser solutions without PHP programming. These are the people who have maybe come from the Excel world, who have moved to FileMaker, but they really aren't FileMaker experts. They want to learn about WebDirect and how to take the next step. Now, if you're an intermediate or an advanced FileMaker user and you want to watch this video, you're going to get a lot from it. There are a number of things in here about FileMaker 13 that most people don't know. And there's a lot of under the hood things in this video about WebDirect that generally haven't been published. So if you pay attention, you stand to gain a lot of information as well. Also, I'm going to assume that everyone watching this presentation is already familiar with the FileMaker platform and that they already have a general understanding of FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Server and FileMaker Go. If this is your first exposure to these products, I highly recommend that you watch a different video to get an overview. So what is WebDirect? WebDirect is the automatic rendering of FileMaker layouts and behaviors to a web browser without any PHP programming or without any programming at all. It's a completely new deployment capability for the FileMaker platform. This is huge. It's a complete replacement for instant web publishing. Now, WebDirect only comes from FileMaker Server 13. So understand that FileMaker Server is what hosts or publishes WebDirect. Now, it's important to understand also that while we're talking about FileMaker 13, the platform, this video session is about WebDirect, the first shipping version of WebDirect. So WebDirect at this point is really a 1.0 product. So keep that in mind. So let me go ahead and dive out of PowerPoint and give you a quick demo of what WebDirect is. I've gone ahead and logged on to a copy of FM Starting Point, which is a free starter solution that my company has. I'm in FileMaker Pro 13 right here, and I want to show you how well WebDirect actually works. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and fire up my browser here. And of course you could do this on Windows as well. WebDirect also works great on Internet Explorer. I'm in Safari right now on a Mac, but you could also use Chrome. I type in the URL for my server, and it's going to show me an available list of the files on the server. I'm going to go ahead and fire up a copy of FM Starting Point 3 English. And now what you're going to see right here is that WebDirect actually employs the same security system that's under the hood in FileMaker Pro. Whatever security setup that you have, passwords, users, things like that are in FileMaker Pro will be preserved and made to work in WebDirect. I'm going to type in my password for this database and I press OK. And what happens is that WebDirect reproduces FM starting point precisely, or almost precisely. It's really close. In fact, at the top of the screen, we even get some of the menu items that we have in FileMaker. So if I click here, we have File and Edit, Insert, View, and Records, all these kinds of things. Those are actually still up here at the top as well. All these kinds of things are still in here. Now, as we'll discuss in a little bit, WebDirect doesn't have 100% of the things in it that FileMaker Pro does, but it does have a ton of the features that you're likely to need. So I'm going to go over here in Pro and click on Contacts, which is one of the core modules in FM Starting Point. I'm going to go back over here to WebDirect. I'm going to click, make sure Safari is up, and here you can see it brings up the layout just fine. Now it's actually displaying it off the bottom of the video a little bit, but you can see it's doing a great job of rendering this layout. In fact, we're on the same record right here that you can see. I can click on this field and make an edit right here, and then click out. And you can see that FileMaker Pro has been updated by FileMaker 13 almost instantly. I also have my record navigational controls up here at the top, just like I have in FileMaker Pro. So that's pretty slick. So users don't have to learn a completely new interface to use WebDirect. So that's effectively what WebDirect is. It's a lightweight client that works in a web browser, and it gives you probably 70% of the capabilities of what FileMaker Pro is. But it's not as fast as FileMaker Pro, and it definitely has some real-world limitations. So let's continue on with the presentation. Now this leads us up to the major points of WebDirect. Use WebDirect for occasional users or users outside the organization where there may be deployment issues with FileMaker Pro. And this is important. This is the first release of WebDirect, and it's not intended for deployment to browsers on mobile devices or phones. This is really important if you're an Android user and you think this might be a great tool for the Droid. FileMaker Incorporated would love this to be a great tool for the Droid, but it's not there just yet. Now the team at FileMaker Engineering plans on improving WebDirect through updated releases of FileMaker Server 13. So as updates are released for FileMaker Server through V2 or V3 later on this coming year, you will see performance improvements in WebDirect. However, that being said, WebDirect at the current time is not engineered for the mobile platform. But stay tuned, as this is something that we should see in the future. Which takes us to our next point. WebDirect is not free. Now this might seem counterintuitive because you access it from a web browser, and web browsers are free. But the reality is that you need a connection license to be purchased and put on your FileMaker server in order for FileMaker Server 13 to be able to publish WebDirect out to browsers. So this means that WebDirect is not a strategy for getting out of purchasing FileMaker Pro licenses. And this is super important. This gets into the positioning of WebDirect for yourself, your organization, and maybe your clients. WebDirect is not as powerful as FileMaker Pro because it runs in a browser. It is not a dedicated piece of software. FileMaker Server has a database engine, and it talks to FileMaker Pro, which has its own database engine. This has historically been the way FileMaker has operated for 20 years. And FileMaker Incorporated has been tuning this interaction every year, making it better and better. These two engines work together to give customers the best possible experience. WebDirect is a brand new model, and it only features one engine. The FileMaker server has to do all the work, and as a result, the data has to move back and forth to the browser. The browser caches a little bit of the information, but there is no database engine there to help in processing or to help in logical calculations to help keep things moving smoothly for the user. So understand the structural differences between the historic FileMaker model and the new WebDirect model. Because of this, FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Go will always make customers happier with their snappier performance and fully rich feature sets. So with this in mind, consider WebDirect for lightweight users who don't use FileMaker often or who use it in a very minimal way. Those are types of situations are users who might be outside the company. Maybe you have a sales force that is outside the company who don't access the database very often. Maybe you have a warehouse in a remote location and they need to update minimal inventory information periodically. Or you have a third-party vendor who needs to access supply chain information. They need access to a limited set of information and they don't really need to purchase FileMaker, but they do need to have deeper access to the database. So instead of paying a lot of money or expending a lot of effort to build a PHP-based website, consider deploying WebDirect instead. Now, the last sweet spot for WebDirect are situations where you might have deployment issues where the local IT organization might not want FileMaker installed. If you have a situation like that, WebDirect might be the only way to get a FileMaker client in front of a user. So now that we've talked about positioning, let's talk about optimizing our solutions for WebDirect. Keep in mind, simpler solutions may work fine without modification, but there are several main areas to be concerned with when looking at your solution for deployment with WebDirect. Solutions will break due to fundamental limitations of the web browser as opposed to deployment on a robust FileMaker client like FileMaker Pro. Also keep in mind that web browsers impose a limitation of a single document interface. So if you build FileMaker solutions where the user has a window open, and maybe they have a second window open, and then maybe a third window open, and the user is interacting between multiple windows, WebDirect cannot replicate this behavior. WebDirect operates in a single document interface or a single window. So you're going to need to restructure or re-engineer your solution to operate in that fashion if you're one of these people. Please understand that this is a limitation that may require some work from you before you can effectively use WebDirect. And there's also going to be some solutions that will need to be optimized at the layout level before they can run effectively or quickly within WebDirect. So that's what we're going to be spending our time looking at during the rest of this presentation. So we had a realization while testing WebDirect, and that was back in 2010 we were doing a lot of early testing with FileMaker Go, and we had a similar sort of thought back then, and that is that FileMaker Go greatly benefits from purpose-built layouts. And those are layouts that are specifically created and tuned for use on the iPad or iPhone. Well, WebDirect benefits the same way from layouts that are specifically developed and tuned for it. Now, if you pay attention to what we're saying here, and in the rest of this presentation, and the techniques that we're going to show you, the following techniques will greatly improve the performance over a wide area network of your solutions as they operate between a FileMaker server and clients that are using Go and Pro. So while we'll be discussing tips to make WebDirect go faster, these improvements will greatly help your performance between FileMaker Go and FileMaker Pro as well. So that's a bonus. So this is a win-win-win all the way around. So step 1, planning and analysis. We need to look and review our deployment plans. We need to look at what users will be using WebDirect and what their workflow looks like. We need to look at creating custom layouts and workflow that meets their specific needs. Now, at the FileMaker Developers Conference in 2013, there were a number of sessions that dealt with user-centered design. These sessions were recorded as videos, and they're now available to be downloaded from FileMaker's TechNet website. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time discussing user-centered design. But if you're a good developer, most likely you're already using user-centered design. And this is basically the concept of making sure that the user is in the center of your design choices as you're developing a database solution. The functions and the capabilities on the layouts are central to the user's workflow. And that's super critical here. Before, maybe you considered these items fluffy and not necessary, but now, by taking advantage of user-centered design, we can really optimize the workflow and we can really improve the performance of a WebDirect solution. Step 2. Layout should be created specifically and optimized for WebDirect. So that's where we're going with this. So how do we do that? The tricks that we're going to dive in here, a couple were talked about at the Developers Conference in 2013, but most of the content here is new and is specific to the FileMaker 13 platform. Most of the things we're going to discuss aren't even possible with FileMaker 12. So the first and most important item to highlight is the idea of minimizing the number of objects on a layout. Now this is not a new tip, but it might be new for you to think about, and I'm going to hit you with the simple stuff first. So first, workflow analysis, thinking about the workflow. Second is removing unnecessary objects from the layout. What's an object? Well, an object is anything that's on the layout. So at the top of the screen, we see a field and a field label. Each of these two objects has their own block of XML, and within the XML is some CSS. Now this is all hidden under the hood in FileMaker, but it's important to understand what's going on. That box of XML describes the object and how it's drawn on the layout. And it's pushed down through the pipe from FileMaker Server to the client. Normally it would be pushed down through the network to FileMaker Pro or to Go, but in this case it's going to the web browser and then it comes back if there is an update or change to the data. But the idea is that every time we have an object, another descriptive block, like the information at the top, has to be pushed down. So if you have a layout with a ton of objects on it, each object has a block of information just like the one you saw. And that results in pushing a ton of information down through the network. So once again, think about workflow, think about optimizing screens, and think about giving the users just what they need to see and not giving them everything, including the kitchen sink. So think about a more simple layout. Now this layout might be too simple, but think about simplifying your layouts. This layout here has a whole lot less descriptive blocks of XML than the first one, which leads us to our first hot tip. Take a busy layout, break the objects into functional workflow, and we already talked about workflow. First, we're going to identify the pieces that we need, and then break them across multiple layouts if possible. Some WebDirect users may not need all the layouts, so why make them load all those objects on screen at one time? So this is a complete screenshot of FM Starting Point, the contact screen. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we determine that this is an important piece of workflow and they need everything on here. Now this is a lot of information to push down, so maybe for the users who are on WebDirect, we're going to break this down into functional segments. Because they don't need all the information on screen at one time, maybe we determine that they only need the first block initially. So we give them this piece for them to edit and update. Now this might be one way to go. Now maybe it's not the right way for your situation, but it's one possible way. And then from there, they could go to the next screen. And you could build a button-based or menu-driven system to take them to the various screens. But some of the users won't need to go to all the sections. And so the point is, why have them load everything on one screen when they only need one or two of the smaller layouts? Because the small layouts load very rapidly. WebDirect is very sensitive to to pushing a lot of objects down through the network to the web browser. So the goal is to really lighten the load. So keep that in mind. So step 1 was review the workflow and determine what the users really need. Step 2, limit the objects. Think about how you're going to limit those things. Remove the items you don't need. Break them down into different layouts. And step 3 is to get into customized styles and themes for your layouts. And this is the next great step that has only been made possible with the release of FileMaker Pro 13. Custom styles and a custom theme for a layout were not possible in FileMaker 12. So let's go ahead and dive into this. I'm going to go ahead and switch out our PowerPoint here and jump into FileMaker. So here I have a copy of FM Starting Point, and I want to look at optimizing this for deployment on WebDirect. Now I have this application called Wireshark. This is an application that allows me to measure the bandwidth between FileMaker Server and a FileMaker client like FileMaker Go or Pro, or in this case, WebDirect. Now I have a copy of FM Starting Point, and I have put it up on my FileMaker 13 server. And I've gone ahead and logged on to FM Starting Point with my copy of FileMaker Pro 13. We're going to use Wireshark to measure the bandwidth from the main menu right here to the contacts data entry screen right here. This is a simple process of jumping layouts, which is what we want to do. Now I am in FileMaker Pro right now, but that is where we have to make all of our changes. So Wireshark is going to measure the bandwidth from here to here. So first off, I'm on a layout here. This is a layout that we created in FileMaker 12. So like most users, if you really want to customize your layouts in FileMaker 12, you end up using the classic theme and customizing the objects to meet your particular needs. This is pretty common. At the FileMaker Developers Conference in 2013, when asked for a show of hands, a vast majority of the users were using the classic themes to customize their layouts just the way they wanted. This is because themes in FileMaker 12 could not be customized and saved. The problem with using the classic theme is for every object on a layout, there is a complete set of descriptive CSS that tells FileMaker how to draw that object, and this is really wasteful. The idea is to have these objects that are very similar share the same description, and that is what we can do by sharing a custom style. What I'm going to do is walk you through how we made this layout twice as fast. So first off, I'm going to create a new window. Now I'm still on this contacts layout, and I don't want to mess it up. So I'm going to go ahead and say Layout, Duplicate Layout. Next, I'm going to change the theme for this layout. I can do that by going up to Layout, Change Theme. Now the themes under Aspire are all new to FileMaker 13. This is a completely new family of themes that are part of FileMaker 13. I'm going to select Vibrant because this is kind of cool and it reminds me of the layout that we were using previously. And I look at this and it's not too horrible, but it is really different than what I had before. And so I asked one of my engineers that is new on the team to sit down, and he spent about half a day retooling this layout to make it look like the original design. Because I kind of like the original layout over here. I thought it looked a little nicer, and I said, can't you take this and tweak it and customize it? So he went into layout mode, and he actually went over here and went under data and the appearance panel and made all sorts of adjustments and customizations and all sorts of little tweaks and things. And what he would do is he would take an object like this, he would go into style, and after adjusting it the way he wanted, and he would say this is going to be a new style. And he would say this is going to be FM Starting Point Standard Edit Box, and say OK. Now that's going to be a saved style, and now that's part of this theme, which is part of this layout now. Now that has its own block of CSS. Now I can click on these other similar objects over here that still have their own block of CSS. I'm going to select all these over here, all these everywhere over here, and I'm going to tell them to use the standard saved style. So we have a shared style. They're all sharing the same style instead of them having their own block of descriptive CSS. They are all sharing the same block. And suddenly, this layout is already much lighter. Now, it was already much lighter when I went to the new theme here. Now, it was radically transformed when I converted it to the vibrant theme under the hood. But we wanted to customize it with a shared style so it had a design that my team approved of. Instead of styling each item individually and giving it its own complete set of CSS, we want to create a shared style. So what we ended up with after about a half a day of work was a layout that looked like this. So here you can see what we have is a layout that looks almost identical. The difference is this layout right here is the original using the classic theme. But this layout right here, we have created all of the shared styles between the fields here, and it has its own custom theme. So this layout right here is much lighter, and that is the critical piece of knowledge that I am trying to explain, and I hope that you understand, that you can take away and employ into your own solution. So if you look right here at these labels, you can see that these labels share their own shared style. If you look at these buttons across the top, they share a shared style. So you get the idea that you have shared styles between similar objects. So what was the difference in bandwidth between this layout in Classic and this layout with a custom theme? This layout to push to download one time as we navigate from home was 850 kilobytes of information, or almost a megabyte of information. And that's quite a bit for a single layout. By creating a custom theme for the layout and shared styles, the single process of going from the home layout to the contacts layout was reduced to 425 kilobytes, or about half the original size, which may translate to about twice the speed of the original. Depends on network conditions, but you may get twice the speed. So we thought that was really an amazing improvement. So as a side note, we also decided that since we took a FileMaker design and we were monkeying with it quite a bit, what if we took a FileMaker design and just left it unaltered? And we did that too. We actually went to this layout over here, and this one here is based upon the stone theme, and it is unaltered. Of course, from theme to theme, the weight will change somewhat, and the cost from going home to the contacts data entry layout went down to 225 kilobytes. So we go from 850 to 425, which is a huge improvement, and the interface looks almost identical. And if you're willing to give up on your custom design entirely, you can cut the design down in half again. So now I have showed you how much you can save if you set up your own customized style and shared themes. Let me explain to you a little bit more about how this works. First off, if you click into an object and make customized changes for that individual object, then you are creating additional level of CSS that is local to that object. This is called a local override for the CSS. Now this is a bit technical, but effectively what you're doing is creating a whole lot of extra work. And the downside is that FileMaker has to push that down from FileMaker Server down to the web browser when a user accesses that object. So try to minimize making individual customizations to objects. If you're going to make individual customizations, try to take that object, go to Style, and save the style or create a new style. This allows those object attributes to be saved at the layout level and to be shared with other objects on the layout without additional penalty. Another hot tip that you should consider is that the Format Painter tool up here in the corner should be avoided at all costs if you're building a layout for deployment on WebDirect. And that's because of the way the Format Painter tool works. Say, for example, that the department field has a style on it that you want to use on other fields. Well, historically in FileMaker, you would click the Format Painter tool, and it's going to remember the settings for this object. Now, the settings that you would think it would remember would be that the department field had the shared style main field. If I click over here and paint the primary address right here, you'll notice that the indicator has gone red right here. This is because the Format Painter tool did not actually copy, as you would expect, from the department to the primary street. The Format Painter tool took the department settings and copied the shared style down to the primary address, but copied it and made it unique to the address 1 field. It's a bit of an abstract concept, but the whole idea of this process that we've been going through is to make sure that all the objects in here are sharing the same block of CSS, and the bottom line is that the Format Painter tool does not preserve the shared style. It should have preserved it from the department field to the primary street, but it didn't do that. It actually took the information from the shared style and copied it in to a local override for the primary street, which basically creates a whole additional block of CSS under the hood in this layout. Now, it looks fine on screen, and the user will never know what's happened, and the developer, if they're not paying attention, will have no idea what's gone on. But if you use the Format Painter and affect enough fields under the hood, you're going to cause a performance penalty when rendering this layout. FileMaker is aware of this limitation, and their official recommendation is, as I described before, is to actually select the fields that you want to have use a shared style, and then manually select the style from the Style panel in the inspector. I want to take a quick moment and address the issue of having a custom style and shared styles on a layout that are optimized for WebDirect while using a solution in a hybrid environment. And what I mean by this, I'm talking about an environment where some users are using FileMaker Pro 13 and some users are using FileMaker 12 products. Now, of course, strictly speaking, FileMaker 12 and FileMaker 13 share the same file format. So FileMaker 12 can open FileMaker 13 files, and FileMaker 13 can open FileMaker 12 files. And they can actually open the same files on the FileMaker server at the same time. But that can lead to some interesting situations when you start incorporating FileMaker 13 specific features into your solution and then going back and opening that solution in FileMaker 12. Custom themes and custom styles are unique to FileMaker 13, and FileMaker 12 does not know how to recognize them. This is the layout that we previously created in FileMaker 13 with the customized theme RCC Vibrant. This has been optimized for delivery on WebDirect. Now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and open this with FileMaker 12 on my machine. I'm opening up the same database to the same layout. I actually am in FileMaker 12 right here, as you can see, and it's generally rendering okay. But that will not happen in all situations. And as you can see right here, there are some differences in certain functionality in the layout. In this case, the labels here are not rendering correctly, and this cannot be corrected for FileMaker 12 users. Over here, you can see in FileMaker 13 that it is rendering the labels correctly. But over here, in 12, we have a fairly minor defect, but it can't really be corrected for FileMaker 12 users without negatively affecting the 13 users. The key point to understand is that you can open a layout with a custom theme in FileMaker 12, but it may not render the layout correctly. If you go so far as to actually go into layout mode in FileMaker 12 with a layout set with a custom theme, then you're really asking for trouble, because FileMaker 12 does not understand custom themes or shared styles. In fact, if you go up under Layout and down to Change Theme, the custom theme that we defined, RCC Vibrant, is not even displayed. FileMaker 12 does not know what to do. So it's going to default back to what it knows, which is cool gray, in FileMaker 12. Now in this situation, the variations between 12 and 13 are not too bad, but in a lot of cases, 12 is going to have a much more serious allergic reaction to what we're going to see. You run the risk of breaking objects in the layout to the point where they will not work, and that is especially true if you're one of the developers who manually went under the hood in FileMaker 12 and customized the CSS on your own. That activity was not approved by FileMaker Incorporated and was not an approved modification to a FileMaker database. And it's one of those situations where if you've been messing around under the hood with CSS to a FileMaker file, and you take that FileMaker file up to FileMaker 13, things may get real exciting because FileMaker 13 assumes that the CSS is going to exist in a very specific format. So if you've been playing under the hood, behind the scenes, in a non-approved fashion in your FileMaker file, you may see unexpected or aberrant behavior. And this is why FileMaker Incorporated specifically warn users against hacking the CSS in FileMaker 12. So FileMaker's general guidance on this topic is that if you're going to have users accessing layouts in a hybrid environment, make sure the layouts that are accessed by FileMaker 12 users do not contain custom themes and custom styles. Of course, if you think about this, that makes sense, because the first lesson that we've learned in this video was that WebDirect layouts should have their own specialized layouts dedicated for their own purposes. And that's just another reason to follow our own recommendations. Now, a couple of long-standing recommendations I want to remind you of. First off, sticking large images on your WebDirect layouts is generally not recommended. So if you have a beautiful picture of Hawaii, or of a race car, or maybe a fighter plane, something like that that you think is really cool that you could put in the background, that's going to cause a lot of overhead and bandwidth on your network connection, and that's going to really penalize the performance of your WebDirect layout. It is recommended not to use a lot of images on your WebDirect screens. Using the FileMaker toolset is the preferred method for creating buttons, as opposed to creating images in Photoshop and copying and pasting those buttons or importing them into FileMaker Pro. A couple of other tips about WebDirect. Tab and slide controls generally have a lot of object data associated with them. Use of tab and slide controls is generally not recommended. However, keep in mind that if you do use them, object data on the non-viewed panels does not cause an immediate download penalty. That means if the slide or tab panels that you do not immediately see will not be downloaded immediately. If you slide or tab to those panels, there will be a delay as a web browser goes back to the server with WebDirect to refresh and get new information to display in those panels. The same is also true on popovers. If you have a FileMaker layout, there will be no immediate penalty for having a popover available on the layout. However, activating the popover in WebDirect will cause the browser to ping the server to get additional information as to how to display the contents of that popover. So understand that there is a penalty in terms of communication back to the server if you move slide or tab control panels or you display a popover. Now, something cool came up during our testing, and that is there's one area where WebDirect is really awesome, and that is doing sorts on the server as opposed to FileMaker Pro. And why is this? Well, doing sorts on FileMaker Server, where the data is local on the hard drive of the FileMaker server, is always faster than sending the data down across the wire so that the client does the sort. Structurally, the FileMaker platform does sorts by sending the data down through the wire from FileMaker Server to FileMaker Pro so that FileMaker Pro does the actual sort. This is kind of an interesting issue with FileMaker. I'm not going to get into details of why this is, but when FileMaker is interacting with Pro and Go, it actually does send all the data down to the client so the client does the sorting. This actually can result in some fairly slow performance when compared with WebDirect. WebDirect forces everything to be done on the server. And if the server does a local sort of the data, that happens right on the machine where the data resides. So as you can see from this test, we had about 350,000 records, and WebDirect performed the sort in about 57 seconds, as opposed to 225 seconds in FileMaker Pro. Now we have the machine information down below if you're interested, but that makes FileMaker sorts about 400% slower than WebDirect. So that's one area where WebDirect is actually much, much faster. So now we're in the Q&A section, and we've collected a number of questions from customers that have been emailed to us over the last number of weeks since FileMaker 13 shipped, and I wanted to address those. So the first question is, can you use WebDirect to allow older computers access to FileMaker 13? And the answer is, the requirements for WebDirect are pretty high, just like the requirements for Pro 13. WebDirect requires a modern browser, and it uses HTML5, and so there's some modern technology at work. In fact, it's pretty advanced stuff under the hood to make WebDirect work in general. So as a result, you're not going to be able to use a Windows 98 machine with a really old browser to access WebDirect. I'm going to post the requirements right here that you need to access WebDirect. As you can see, older machines are not supported very well with that. And that's unlike what you'll see with Citrix users who can use that technology with old machines to access more modern applications. WebDirect is not intended to allow old machines to access more modern technology. What are the costs for WebDirect? Well, to purchase WebDirect, you need to buy connection licenses for FileMaker Server 13. The connection licenses are $180 per user, and they are sold in packs of 5. Now, the $180 price is a perpetual license, which means it's a forever license. Now, FileMaker does sell annual licenses for people who want to do an annual budget and write a check annually, and it's about a third of the cost that way. And that's a concurrent license, which means that if you have people who are logging on intermittently, 5 concurrent connections might service 10 people. So if you have 10 people logging on periodically, only 5 people may be on at one time. So a 5-pack of connection licenses might service 10 people just fine. The next question we've received a number of times, what are the supported browsers? The supported browsers are Microsoft Explorer, Safari, and Chrome. Now there's general agreement that Firefox works, but I don't think that's official at this point. Can you use FileMaker 11 file with WebDirect? You have to convert the FileMaker 11 file to the new FileMaker 13 file format before you can use it with WebDirect. So remember, to use WebDirect, the file has to be hosted on a FileMaker 13 server. So you have to get your FileMaker 11 file onto a 13 server. So that's the path. You have to convert it from the FP7 file format, and all that has to be done on FileMaker Pro. So you have to close the file out of Pro 11. You're going to have to open it up with Pro 13. Pro 13 does the conversion to the FMP12 file format, which is the new extension. Once it's been converted to the new file format, then you need to install that file up on your FileMaker 13 server. Once it's on the FileMaker 13 server, then you'll be in a position to get it hosted with WebDirect. Next question, what devices can access WebDirect? Well, just to reiterate, FileMaker recommends that users do not use mobile devices to access WebDirect at this time. So desktop computers and laptop computers are all right. Handheld devices like Android phones, Android tablets, or even iPhones and iPads are not recommended for use with WebDirect. Now they will work, strictly speaking, but the performance I think will be sufficiently poor that you will not be well served. Next question, I've been working on a FileMaker 12 file, can I just put it up on WebDirect? The answer is yes, you can take a FileMaker 12 file, close it out of Pro 12, but you'll need to move it up and install it on a copy of 13 server. So if you have a copy of 12 server, it cannot host WebDirect. WebDirect is a feature unique to 13 server. It's not part of FileMaker 12. So you need to have 13 server to utilize WebDirect. So I think that wraps things up. I appreciate everyone watching this video. Be sure to pass the link on to your friends and subscribe to our channel here at FileMakerVideos.com. Also be on the lookout for our training series on FileMaker Go 13 and then our training series for WebDirect. we're going to get into the ins and outs of both of these products, more than just optimization. There's a lot of moving pieces with both these technologies, so these training series will be very valuable for those people building solutions. I also want to thank the team at FileMaker, both the product management team and the engineering team, for their advice and encouragement in the production of this video. And so for the team here at RC Consulting, I'm Richard Carlton, and I'll see you next time.